But in terms of gender binary, where did that start for you all? Where did that emerge? How did you know? How did you reach the point of your current identity?
I think mine was kind of funny because usually, like, for me in my process, because like I felt a very similar process coming out as queer, because that also to me was a non-binary identity. I don't have a gender like discrimination in terms of my attractions to people. So like at that point, like I noticed the attraction thing first, and then I came up with the word. And for my process with my binary, what actually happened was I was at an interview for a job, and they asked me what my gender identity was, and out of nowhere I was just like, I think I'm trans. And then like it was like this really awkward moment where like I had to like, like I had never said it before, and I was like, wait, am I? And then like went through a whole thing, and I was like, oh wow, guess that's real. And so I think, and then like from there I was figuring it out, and for a while I was like, oh, I'm non-binary in that I don't adhere to gender roles. And then I was like, wait, no, okay. And I was like, I use she, they. And then I was like, I use they, she. And then I'm like, I use they. So it's been a process. It's definitely been a process. But like, I think it has evolved over time. And a lot of it actually, for me, has had to do with like being seen, which is an unfortunate reality. Because like, I think in my ideal world, I would be able to be feminine and like androgynous and like alternate all the time, but the reality of it is that like I'm bred very differently, and I've kind of come to a place where like my close people in my life use they, or people who I know I'll be safe with, I ask them to use they, but my family doesn't, strangers don't, and I'm okay with that because like she is not totally wrong, it's just not totally right, and not really like an exclusively right thing for me. So I guess that is to say that my gender identity has definitely evolved over time, and I think there was a long time in my life that was absolutely true where I identified as a woman, and felt really connected to sisterhood, and I still do in some ways. And I think that that's something that is sometimes pushed out on people, that in order to be, especially trans people, that in order to be trans, you must have known from the age of 2. And if you didn't, then like, what's wrong with you, kind of idea. Not usually by other trans people, but by cis people. And so I think like, for me, it came organically as I learned more about myself.
For me, it was a very sudden thing, and it was a very quick moving thing. Basically, I was always anxious and uncomfortable with myself, didn't know why. I had never really questioned if I was trans or not, but I knew, like, I identified as a woman just because it was default. I was assigned female at birth, so it's my default setting. And then I went to college, and I started building this student organization that we call the Human Experience, which is all about LGBT identity. And we got this, someone brought this article in about a student at University of Missouri, because my school's right by there, and it was about a genderqueer individual who is running for homecoming king. And I saw that, and it just clicked with me. I was like, why do I relate to this so much? And I didn't know why, and so that started my whole range of thinking. I was like, I relate to this. Why do I relate to this? Oh my God, what's going on? And so I took a year off, and I figured out, I first identified as gender fluid, and I started going from like dramatic masculine to dramatic feminine, and like nothing in between or no mixing. And then I realized that that just wasn't me, that I like the more, that it just wasn't me. And so then I identified as genderqueer, and for me that's like, if male is over here, or man is over here, and woman's over here, I'm like way over there. Like I'm just like other. Like I'm not in between. I'm like way over, like football fields away, worlds away, like that's me over there. And then I knew that I started going by they or he pronouns, and then I quickly realized that I didn't like he either, like at all. It's not me. And I actually tried a different name before MJ, because MJ is not my given name. And that didn't work either. I never responded to it. It's quite funny. Like I was living with my friend's family, and like they'd be like, Drew, Drew. And I was like, yeah, this isn't working. This isn't working. I'm not responding to my own name. It was really good. But then I found the name MJ based on actually other people were like, why don't you try this name? It's similar to my given name, but it's not like the same. And so I was like, I really don't want to do that because it's so similar. And then I started doing it. I was like, yeah, this fits. Okay, fine, you guys are right. So I started going by they, them pronouns and the name MJ, and then moved back to Wisconsin and started hormones. And I was on hormones for 1.5 years. And then a year into that, I changed my legal name to Maxwell Joseph Jonen, which is actually my cousin's name. I named myself after my cousin that passed away before I was born. And his parents are like really touched by it, and like I called them and asked permission, and they're like, I love this. And so they're like my family, like my mom and my aunt and uncle are the only people that call me Max. But it's a really touching thing for me. Like it means a lot that I could find a name that fit with MJ. And then and then a few months after that I had top surgery, and then a few months after that I stopped hormones because I was like happy where I am. But now my voice is raised a bit, and I'm like, I think I might go back on hormones because my voice is raised and I don't pass as not female anymore, and I don't like that. So that's where I am now. I think I covered everything. So yeah.
Okay, I can do it. So yeah, I kind of shared it a bit. So when I was young, like pretty much like middle school, I already knew I'm different than other people because I don't feel I'm like very a girl because like I just hate everything girls do. Like they all together gossip and play, and I don't like it. I only play with boys, but then I don't want to be identified as boy because like high school age boy always like fighting and chasing with girls. I don't want to do it. That's just like so I kind of knew I'm like different than others, but then that kind of like wasn't really like. I wasn't really feeling like, oh, that need to be like, I need to like know who I am immediately. So I was like, okay, I'll just like not identify as like very like feminine girl at the time. But then when time go by to like college, every people around, they somehow identify as probably like traditional binary. Like boys all dress up like boys and girls all dress up like boy always masculinity and girl always feminine. Then I feel very obviously like not identifies in either of the boxes. So it's like, then I start feeling like, I need to like find like who I am. So I look up lots of like resources back to the time and like trying to figure out who I am. But I don't have resources because at the time we don't have like LGBT center or any kind of support group around. And I'm just like feeling like I'm the only one on the planet that identifies as not female or male. But then I came here, study abroad, give me a chance to learn more and work with LGBT center, like learn from other people, and then start to know all this terminology terms about non-binary, binary, cisgender, and all this stuff. And that will help me to like find myself. Then I could be identified as like bigender, non-binary, gender folks, gender fluids, whatever. That made me feel more comfortable, and also eventually I feel like I find who I am. Like all these past like 20-something years, I eventually find who I am. So I'm happy and still learning from people more about all this stuff. So which is good because I feel like I'm wasting my past 20-something years to not knowing. So I'm trying to catch up.
So I think I knew I was trans since college, but after college for a while I tried really hard to like be straight and super feminine and stuff, and it just didn't work. So then for a while I was just like obviously queer, like people always read me as a lesbian, which is fine, I'm bi, but whatever. And then it just like got to the point where I was just like thinking about transitioning like all the time. And yeah, this is like pretty much everything I read was about like transitioning and like medically and all that kind of stuff. And I'm kind of like a throwback because all I did was read books. I like didn't think to Google it, and I don't know why, but so like everything I was reading was kind of dated. So I was all like, well, how am I going to be able to like live as a guy for a year? And then eventually I found out like accurate information. But then so like once I had top surgery and started on testosterone, I just kind of felt like I was going into like a guy box, and I realized that was as restrictive as the girl box. And it just like that didn't fit either. And somebody I was dating told me that the more I tried to act macho, the gayer I seemed, which is funny. But yeah, so then like prior to transitioning, I just hadn't done that much research because I was just focused on like what I thought my transition would look like. So then like once I was like more part of the trans community, I was like, well, I need to learn about like everybody. So I was like reading more about like the different non-binary identities, and I read agender, and I was like, oh my god, that is so what I am. So I don't know, yeah, and I tried to do like, I think what everybody has said, do that he/they for a while, and I found that if you do that, people will usually default to the binary one.
Yep.
I'm curious if folks would be willing to share a little bit more about their choices around some of those, I think what a lot of communities think of as traditional trans actions, and how that fits in with your non-binary identity. If you're willing to share, or if you want to talk in generalities about that.
For me, I consider transition pretty much from the get-go, but it's definitely, my ideas around it have definitely evolved pretty quickly in ways I didn't expect. Because at first I was like, yep, hormones all the way, hormones the rest of my life, and definitely not top surgery. That was my first, like when I came out, I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And then I started testosterone, and I was like, yeah, this is going right, you know, my voice is dropping, I'm looking more masculine, and I was like really liking this. And then I was like, well, now my chest doesn't fit who I am. Like that was like, I just realized that my chest was just this extra thing that made me uncomfortable that I didn't want. And so I decided to have top surgery. And then I actually stopped hormones after 1.5 years, partially because of my mental health issues. I have bipolar disorder, and I didn't know that at the time, and my mental health was getting worse, and testosterone will sometimes bring out, will make mental health issues more unstable. And so I stopped the hormones because of that, and then realized that I was actually comfortable where I was, so it was kind of a backwards motion. But I used to think of it as like very binary, but then I realized, like, I figured out the terms trans masculine and trans feminine, and I now refer to surgeries instead of FTM surgeries or MTF surgeries. They are masculinization surgeries or feminization surgeries. And that really worked and helped a lot to change my mindset, to help me be more comfortable in what I'm doing, even though people see it as binary actions, and me switching like the binary instead of being outside the binary.
I like what you said about the words, because I think the reason I identify as transmasculine in addition to agender is because that's like kind of my journey. Like it's where I've been, not how I am, not where I am now, but it's like where I've been. So that's why that word resonates with me. As far as top surgery, that was like my biggest priority because I hated these things. I just wanted them gone. Like even binding, it was still like really obvious that they were there. So that was the first thing I did like several months before I started on T. And I've actually really gone back and forth about whether I want to stay on T, because some of the changes I like and some of them I don't, but it makes me really uncomfortable that people read me as a guy in some ways. But like I also really hate being mammed, so I don't know.
It's a catch-22.
Really?
Yeah.
Yo. So yeah, I have very mixed feelings about that.
Any others sharing on my pop question?
I can I mean, like, I know for myself, at least at this point in my life, that I will never get top surgery, partially because, like, I have never, I guess you could call it fortunate, I've never had physical dysphoria. I've only had, like, emotional identity and like pronoun related dysphoria. So I've always kind of, that's I think why maybe it took me a little longer to get to the like, oh, this is who I am, is because I didn't have those nudges physically.
And the reason that I asked because it was already kind of brought up, but I think a lot of times people think that, oh, here are trans people, here are non-binary people, and there's like a set of different actions that people take.
Right.
And it's important for us to realize that some transitioning-oriented binary trans people may or may not have surgery, and some non-binary folks may or may not have surgery or use hormones or do any of those things. And like, there's not these neat little boxes that we can fit in. So thank you for being open about that. If we can shift a little bit, we heard it a little bit when we went around the room, but a lot of times both trans communities and non-trans communities say, like, I just don't get this whole non-binary thing, like, just, I just don't get it, or, I can't get used to they, them, theirs pronouns, let alone Z, or using people's names. So I'm wondering how you all cope with that I don't get it response, or if it bothers you, or anything that you'd like to share around that I don't get it piece.
I mean, I think the hardest thing for me is that people who say I don't get it typically are the people that don't want to try to get it. So you're really hitting a wall, and it's really hard to knock down that wall that they put up. And so that's the hardest thing for me. But when it comes to pronouns, the way I tell people is like, it's like a name. You use the person's name that they want to go by. You use nicknames. Why can't you use this other version? Like, this is a pronoun. Name, like, they are basically like stand in for names. Why can't you use the correct ones? Like, it's just like another name for me. It's just like pretend it's a nickname for me. And that's the way I try to explain it sometimes, and like how much it means to me is to be like, this is one of my names. This is who I am. So that's the way I try to explain it to people.
It always baffles me, I think, like people are like, use the grammar argument, because like it's been in grammar forever. Like, we use it casually all the time, and I get like that it's different to use it for someone who you think you've gendered, and people use they all the time. Or, what did they bring to you? What did they say? This happens all the time, and we just don't notice it because it's so normal. But then when like we ask someone to do that, it's such a big deal, and it's exhausting. It's definitely like, because like, I mean, I always have to be the person on internet forums or on Facebook to be like, hey, actually, I'm normal. Like, like, I know you don't understand, but like, every time someone says something like, I just don't get it, it feels like I don't want to get it. There are definitely moments where somebody's like, please help me understand. And those are the moments where I get really excited. Like, I'm honestly totally for that. Like, if somebody comes up to me and is like, I've never used this before, I'm learning, and I'm trying. And backtrack a little bit. It's different than when I tell people I use they and they say, I'm gonna mess that up. That sucks. But there's people who will say like, I really wanna learn more, and I'm gonna make it my job, put it on myself to really do more for this. And those are the people that I feel closer to after that interaction, and that I trust more because they're trying.
Yeah, something that, like an interaction with one person who is a survivor was like, they were like, I understand like why you would transition like from female to male, but then like, why can't you just like be a normal guy? And like, I don't know if this would work with people who are not survivors, but like for me, I was like, well, it's really uncomfortable being perceived as a man, like as the perpetrator and stereotypes. But like that was my experience, also that person's experience, and so like that is part of the reason I think I'm really uncomfortable being perceived as male, and that enabled that person to like understand it better, I think. So.
Majority negative experiences I have are with international friends or folks. because I mean, I totally understand the cultural differences and barriers to learn about gender as non-binary or as a spectrum. So most of the time I introduce myself and then tell them my pronouns, and they was like, oh, what do you mean by pronouns? And then I have to go with like kind of 101 to tell them, oh, you know, in the US culture or in majority different culture, I mean, people might not identify as binary, but I also have to explain like what's the binary. So it's kind of rocky, you need to go down and down and down, and then like explain everything, and then how then like the differences between sexual orientation and gender identity. So you can identify as like gay, cisgender man. They said, what's that mean? Like I'm getting identified as gay, cisgender man. I was like, because there's two different identities, and you know people just So I mean like. I mean the same as your like express, like when people actually ask you questions, that means they want to learn. They're willing to open to learn about it. So I think that's a good communication. Like you know, you just be patient and tell people what you know, and like maybe share some of the experiences and some of the resources you have. But sometimes I also have encounter with people who, you know, like totally reject everything you talk about like gender, like they just like totally stick with like gender is binary. So the time like I try to open, but sometimes they just not ready for the conversation. I'll get okay, I understand, I respect. Then I will move on. So I mean, but then sometimes I end up really bad, really shitty. But most of the time I was like, okay, be patient. But be honest, sometimes I feel really like tired to be the one who educate people, learn about it. So. I apologize. I mean, like, I feel like I should be patient all the time and tell people and like communicate with people, but sometimes just like no, not today. Today I'm not educator. So, but majority time is very good. Like to to communicate with people like who willing to learn. So for me it's also good things to educate myself too, because I'm talking or communicating with them. So
yeah, I want to add that like from what I said, there's definitely nuance. There's so much nuance to this. Like. Someone who comes up to me and says like, educate me, and like demands that's different. Or someone who says, educate me, I'm here to listen, and then like every step of the way is not listening at all. And is like bucking everything you say, and is saying, oh yeah, but this said this about that, and you're not like that, and or let me pull this article out that says like people who are non-binary are crazy, and it's just like there's so much that can happen, and that isn't good. So there's the line there, right? And it's just be compassionate, be kind, be open to hearing, like listen, like actually listen. We don't do that a lot. And so actually sitting there and really taking yourself out of it and just hearing someone else and trying to empathize is challenging.
And I think that's part of why I'm really grateful for you all being here, because you are in the educator spot, and it's an intentional time. But we all in this room are the ones that need to carry that forward too, and be able to speak up or be able to help people with pronouns or some of those things, not just those of us who identify as non-binary. So the weight needs to get spread around a little bit so that we're not always the ones doing the heavy lifting. So thanks for the answers. So into another kind of challenging area, I think, is that I think trans communities oftentimes create sets of hierarchies. And I've been around the trans community for a really long time and have seen different hierarchies, different things be on the top of that hierarchy. I'm curious if you all see those hierarchies within the trans community, trans non-binary community, pick your label. And if so, what your thoughts are about what those hierarchies are.
I mean, there's definitely a hierarchy. I think the most common hierarchy that I see is that people, the people at the top of the hierarchy are the people that the general public see as the closest to their normal. And that's the top of like cis people's hierarchy, and sometimes unfortunately that's the top of trans people's hierarchy too, and that really sucks because that leaves people who don't pass as often, who are non-binary, down at the bottom, and that's really shitty. But that's the most common hierarchy I see, and unfortunately the only way to get out of that is to really try to educate the general public and just not consider people who pass all the time as normal. We're all normal. Yeah. Like that's the hard part, but it's what needs to be done to get this hierarchy out.
I also see a hierarchy between like trans people versus non-binary people who have medical stuff and people who don't, people who identify as non-binary and not trans, and it's just all junk, like, just respect each other. So, it bugs me, but.
I'd say there's like a decent amount of what I've heard you refer to as like gatekeeping, which is that, and also like passing is when somebody is perceived as cisgender, which is someone who is assigned the gender at birth that they now identify as. Sorry, just backtracking so that I don't want to like lose people with what I'm going to say. So gatekeeping is kind of this idea that like in order to be trans enough, you have to look a certain way or, you know, sound a certain way or get XYZ interventions like everyone's been mentioning. And I've seen that from binary communities, from trans people. I've seen that from non-binary communities. I've seen that from cis people. Like, it's kind of everywhere, and sometimes it's not at all spoken. It's just like, what pronouns are people willing to use for you today? Like, when I wear dresses, I find that people like that, if you say them for me for like months, suddenly forget. And it's like, okay, that's gatekeeping, you know? Oh, you're not passing enough for me as a non-binary person even, for me to like remember or respect what you're using. Or today I feel safer using she for you and you look more normal, so I'm gonna like, you know, put you in that box kind of thing, if that makes sense. I think that's its own hierarchy of like, especially for non-binary people, there is this image of, somebody once described it to me and it was like so good, this white, elfish, like waifish, assigned female at birth person who's like super tiny and in androgynous clothing and is like in a sports, or like, not sports, like a fashion magazine with like a tilted hat and like suspenders, and that's the non-binary person, and that's it. Like, that's the only way they look. And it's just not true. Like, there's lots of people who can't look that way. I can't look that way. Like, just based off of my physical characteristics. Like, but, and even then, there's like a lot of hierarchy of even like non-binary people, and I mean this in the nicest way to you two, who look masculine. There's a lot that like is more appreciated or more seen, I'd say, than non-binary people who tend to be feminine, particularly if you're assigned female at birth, I think. And I think the same thing goes for assigned male at birth. Those who present feminine are more accepted as non-binary because it's breaking that traditional idea of what is okay. And so when we go back to, like, if I wear a dress and I'm assigned female at birth, suddenly like, oh, that's very much what already is. But honestly, it still isn't, because I'm still non-binary. I'm not a woman in that moment. I'm still a non-binary person. Anyway, I got off on like a...
No, I think that really connected with me, particularly because I had a lot of trouble today picking what to wear to this panel.
Me too.
So I honestly went with what people would expect, which is to be androgynous. I'm wearing an outfit that I'm comfortable with. That's one of my more androgynous outfits. But at first I tried on like a feminine look, and I was like, well then I don't want people to assume I'm a woman because of like what I'm wearing, even though we know this is a non-binary panel, like it still happens. And I didn't want to just masculine be perceived to be like a male man individual, and I was like, I'll go in the middle, I guess. I was just like, I want to pass as non-binary, and unfortunately that's like white, assigned female at birth, androgynous look. Like that's what passing as non-binary tends to be, and it sucks, but it's life. Like, and it goes along with hierarchy like you were talking about.
And I want to just add that I think that non-binary people, and this could be a generalization that's totally off, spend way more time picking out their clothes, or like trans people in general. Like, we spend so much time choosing what we want to wear.
Other comments?
I just agree with everything.
So, I've heard y'all use masculine and feminine in multiple different ways. And I'm wondering how that fits within your framework of non-binary identities or experiences. Is masculine or feminine, are they non-binary, or are they something descriptive? Does it depend on the context?
I think masculine and feminine are more on they're different from gender. They're a gender expression, which I think is the distinction that needs to be made. It's how you present yourself, not who you identify as, so that tends to be more fluid. It is a binary system, but I think it's a more, I don't know how to explain it. It is a binary system, like by nature. It is two different sides. But I think it's less restrictive because there is so much middle ground, and that middle ground is more accepted than middle ground for genders is.
Yes.
So I think it's more all-inclusive than gender is as a binary system.
Other comments?
I just like really agree with that.
All right, so that means you're going to say the truth, then you're going to say, oh yeah. Okay, let's move on a little bit. What is the best thing about identifying as or living in the world as non-binary? Or the best couple of things?
I like confusing people. Like when people aren't sure what I am, that's the favorite part, because that's my version of passing, is when people don't know what I am, because then they're not gendering me in a binary box, and I'm like, yes, you're right, you're confused, you're correct. That is me. So that's my favorite thing about being non-binary, is dealing with people who are confused by not knowing what pronoun to use and stuff like that, because that's the closest to correct they're ever gonna be, and that's awesome. So that's my favorite part.
Same too.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was when I was younger, like high school or like early college year, because sometimes wearing my binder or just wearing a big t-shirt, I basically cover my body, and then sometimes just go to men's room because I was like, I'm not like pervert type of going to men's room, but just I just not sometimes feel like, oh, maybe I just go to men's room and see how people react, like they just see me as another male guys, I walk into the bathroom or something. So it's the same, like I'm just want to like play a little game to myself, exploring myself, and see how people see me differently. Like if you go to women's room, definitely nobody gonna kick me out. But the same, if I'm going to the men's room, nobody kick me out. So it's like, yay! And then I can, I can be who I am. Just so comfortable. Like maybe today I'm doing more like muscularity, and I'm going to men's room. Like the other day I feel more feminine, I'll go to women's room. So it's just like I feel more comfortable with who I am. It doesn't really matter who people see me. I'm not saying that way, but it's just people probably tell you different things, but I don't care. I just want to be who I am. It's just
I think being visible. Well, okay, a couple things. One, I really like breaking the rules of society. The ones that don't get me in huge trouble. But I think that we need to keep mixing these things up. We need to keep fucking up gender, gender fuck. We need to keep doing that so people can live outside of these really strict definitions. And so my favorite part of being non-binary is being visible as a non-binary person and having other people kind of figure out who they are by seeing people like me. And having a community. It is so cool to even with these 4 people, well, 3 people, because I'm with the 4 of us up here, having that moment of just being oh my gosh, you're a little bit like me, and you understand at least. I know you know what I'm talking about, and having those moments and having that community is so beautiful. It makes it all worth it, even with the days that are painful. And I've worked with young people more recently in something we call Pride Camp. And I had these beautiful moments of these young people coming up to me and be I didn't know what this could look like. Or I'm really figuring out who I am. And this next generation of non-binary, or next generation of young people is hugely non-binary. Get ready, because it's we're in the older half of this, but there's some studies that say up to half of the upcoming high schoolers right now identify as non-binary, and that's in California, so maybe it's not quite so high here, but it's gonna revolutionize things. Our ideas of gender are about to change, and for young people, they already have. They already get this. So yeah. I guess that's my favorite thing, is that we're about to change the world. That's awesome.
That is hard to follow. I think my favorite thing is just not feeling constrained by how people think or how I feel I should look. If people read me as a guy wearing earrings, I don't care. And if they're bothered by that, I don't care.
What are the top 3 things that you'd like other people to know about non-binary individuals or identities?
We're human. It's probably like the top one, is we're human, we're just like everybody else. Treat us like you would treat other people.
Yeah, I once had somebody ask me if they were able to use you pronouns.
I've gotten that too.
And it's like, well, I'm still a person. Like, I'm still, or like some people will be like, is it a pronoun for people? And okay, to be honest, there are like probably 0.01% of the trans population identifies with it. But those people are usually doing it to like, again, fuck gender. But like, no, we're humans. We're human. And then I think like another really important thing about non-binary people and identities is, like I said, like this is something that we all need to teach other people. And it's largely on cis people to educate cis people, because cis people don't listen to me because they already think I'm weird. They already like, they don't relate to me, and they're already like, I don't get it. So if more cis people could be doing that, even just having small conversations or little gender pronoun corrections. If you have a friend who uses they and somebody messes up, being really kind about it, but being like there, because a lot of times when somebody misgenders me, I don't feel safe to do it because I'm exhausted. I don't have the energy to like be telling every single stranger I meet that actually I use they pronouns, and when they're like, I don't get it, then we're having that whole conversation. Like, it's a lot. So really, I guess the thing that I want people to know is that we need you, all, everyone, to help us, like, teach other people.
And if we don't correct somebody, it doesn't mean we have ceased to go by they pronouns. It means we're exhausted.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's a really common thing, is if you don't correct people, does that mean that you've changed your pronouns? Like, no, it just means I'm really tired of correcting pronouns, or like you said, I don't feel safe correcting pronouns right now. Like, it's just, there's certain situations where I don't care. Like, if it's there's wait staff at a restaurant, they're not going to see me ever again. I don't care what pronouns they use. Like, I prefer them to use the right pronouns, but I'm not going to correct them because it's just a waste of time at this point. It's not worth it. That's actually something I had to teach my mom, actually, is because she would correct people for me. And I was like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it right now. And then you get into the whole discussion, and she would start educating, but it's like not the right time to educate because they're wait staff and we just want our food.
But I got your back, MJ.
You got my back, but at the same time, it wasn't really worth it because I was hungry.
That was in the beginning.
Yes, that was in the beginning. I've since, yeah, but it happens. And sometimes it's not worth correcting, but that's very few situations, and that's really when you're not ever going to see the person ever again. You're only talking to them for like 5 minutes total. Like, for me, that's not worth it because it's just tiring.
I have one more thing too. One of the greatest things in the world, it's only happened to me probably twice, is when a stranger gets it right. When a stranger uses they for me, and we've never talked, is so like, try it out. You can use they for people that even if you think you know what they are, it's okay to use they for the most part. I have yet to meet anyone who has been offended by using or having they used for them until that question is asked, or like ask the question. When somebody asks me what my pronouns are, I literally am like, like, it's a moment for me, and it probably makes my entire week, not even day. It's like, I like cry inside and try to keep it together, but like, there's such little things that you could do to make people so happy, so happy.
So that's a good lead into the last official question that we have. And so keeping in mind that the folks in the room, some of the folks in the room are non-binary, some of the folks in the room are trans, some of the folks in the room are parents. We love our parents. We have many parents here today, which is nice. So not trying to preach to people, but what is it that folks can do to raise awareness, to support non-binary individuals and communities, knowing that we're all in the same choir right now?
Yeah.
But still, we can preach, but we're all in the same choir.
I mean, I think one big thing, like Kayla was saying, is like asking about pronouns. But even if you're not asking about pronouns, introduce yourself with your pronouns. Like that's just a really common thing, and it gets talking about pronouns to be a more common thing. And that's really what we need, especially for those of us who don't go by binary pronouns, is that discussion needs to be more normalized.
I would agree with MJ, because that's what I've been doing from this year. Like when I start to know new friends, I introduce myself with my pronouns. And well, people definitely ask like, what do you mean? Well, with some of people who probably never have learned about gender pronouns or like gender identity, and I will go with like a little bit like with a one-on-one, then tell them like that's like people telling you like what they are completely identify with gender identity, something like that. So I mean definitely, and I mean and also like I feel like education, like so as we kind of talk about it, sometimes we are like just get tired. Doesn't mean like we're like okay we think we are, I mean who we are, but it's just like if like more people be educated and helping others and square out, like that would be great. Like I mean definitely more and more people will get hands to able to know about it and using it. That would be most important.
I think it's awesome that everybody is here today because like it's a really good way to be educated by people who are like willing to be educating right now. So it's like really important to be aware that just because somebody is non-binary or trans does not mean they feel like educating you. Like you can ask, maybe they do, but not necessarily. So don't assume that. And like Google is your friend, but like also allies. Like for any marginalized group, having allies is so important because people take people who are not whatever marginalized group more seriously.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ways trans, cis, non-binary, everybody can do, I challenge myself to do this all the time, just constantly break your assumptions. Like, notice your assumptions. Take note of what you're seeing and what you're thinking. Like, if I see someone and I'm like, that woman looks beautiful, and then you challenge yourself, wait, how do I know that's a woman? What makes me think that? Even if people who look like everyday people, we know nothing about them, but we make all of these decisions for them. And like, that's not just gender, that's sexual orientation, that's everything. Everything, just challenge what you're thinking. Think about why you're thinking it. Just like, if you do that, you're gonna be able to receive people's identities much more easily. So if they come to you and they say this, you're not gonna be surprised because you're gonna say, you know, or theoretically, I mean, we're all like, we all make assumptions, it's normal, like, but it's something we can constantly work on. Just like we all have biases. We can constantly be noticing them instead of pretending like we don't have them. And that's, I think, really important work. And just like challenge those for other people too. So like, in little ways, little tiny ways, like microcosms of like, things that we see as normal, even like in trans communities. Like people who say like, this is normal for a trans person. What does that mean? What does that even mean? So that's what I think would be something that is inclusive, supportive, and honors all identities.